Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video, I'm going to be letting you know if you should play Retribution Paladin in patch 11.1, Season 2 of The War Within. This isn't the type of rec content I do a lot, however, this is real content that people actually want and will use to make decisions or help them make decisions. I get asked by people in real life, I get asked by people I know in my guild, people I know online, and of course, random commenters and stuff. Ask, how is Rat? I'm thinking about playing it. Is it any good? And so here we go. I'm uniquely qualified to give good information on this topic. And so I will try to do that and help anybody I can in deciding if you should play Rat. So we're going to go through pros and cons of Rat, and I'll give commentary on them, of course, as well. So let's go ahead. Well, I made like just a little thing on paint real quick here. So let's go through the pros first, because this is generally going to be a pro thing. So if you are really wanting to play Rat, this is going to bode well for you. So the first pro, fun to play. Now this is the number one thing for most people. Am I going to have fun playing it? For the most part, I'd say yes. Why is it fun to play? Buttons feel good to press, for the most part, right? You press your button, you get some kind of reaction on the screen. If you're playing, a lot of it comes from the hero talents, which are really good for Rat. Templar being the one that's kind of ahead by a decent amount right now. But Herald's also pretty fun to play as well. So on Templar, after you use your Wake of Ashes, you get Hammer of Light. And I can show you that really quick. I don't have anything to hit right in front of me, so I won't be able to actually hit it, I don't think, unless I can find something to hit, a rat or something. I wasn't really expecting to do this, but I hear something I can hit. I don't know if this thing will one-shot me or not, but so when you use your Wake of Ashes, it turns into Hammer of Light. And so you're going to see, let's actually scroll in a bit here. And let's look at the spell. It does this big old swinging hammer, and it lights up and stuff. It just feels good to press in the middle of combat. And they've also fixed there was a lag on it before, and they fixed that as well. So that makes it actually feel even better than it is, as I try to finish this off so I don't die. But Hammer of Light just feels really good to press. You know, your wings proccing can feel good. A lot of the stuff feels good. With Herald of the Sun, instead of having that big Hammer of Light, you immediately will have beams of light coming out of enemies and allies, and you're burning them to death with the beams of light. It's just kind of fun to play. It's just reality. Almost everybody agrees with this fact of it that plays Rat, that it's kind of fun. The people who don't have fun with it would be the ones that are just like miserable because they're not like the highest DPS or, you know, some other form of it, and not because the buttons aren't fun to press. Second pro, on-demand prio damage. So this is a big thing if you're doing any kind of... It's a big thing no matter what content you're doing, whether you know it or not, but it's very good for high-end content. Meaning, if you have a prio target you need to kill on a Mythic Plus dungeon pull, if you need to put damage into a certain phase and have damage for a certain moment in a raid fight, you can always pretty much do this on Rat. You never really want to hold your cooldowns on Rat because the cooldowns are so short, but... You could, as long as you're only holding it for a little bit, and the cooldowns are so short that you kind of aren't holding them anyways. Like, it's always going to kind of fit into the window. If at the most you hold something for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, whatever, and it's for having a really important moment on demand prio damage, then it's there for you. And like I said, even if you aren't a high-end player, even if you're doing delves or something, having on-demand prio damage can be very important, even in a delve. Whether it's because, like in Season 1 of delves, like Zekvir randomly attacks you, right? To be able to just be like, okay, I have cooldowns for this, and go in on it, that's good. And doing a world quest, it's good. Everything, it's good to have this, even if you don't really notice it in real time. So the damage is not the best damage in the game by any means, but it is on demand, and it's priority damage, which is really valuable. Next up on pros, we have solid defenses. So defensives got nerfed a lot from Dragonflight. So if you haven't played Rat since Dragonflight, or you haven't maybe been keeping track of Rat in the War Within, our defenses are still solid, but we are far from unkillable like we were in Dragonflight. This is something I've been worried about a little bit. We're still kind of middle of the pack, but you know, we lost some other things, saying that, well, we're so tanky that we can lose these other things. But we're not as tanky anymore. However, we're still plenty tanky. So I say all that to say we're still kind of fine. So we have Shield of Vengeance, we have Divine Protection, of course we have Bubble, we have Bop if it's a physical damage thing. We have all kinds of ways to survive things for the most part. Not the most tanky thing, but very solid. You're likely going to have something when you need it. And that allows you. And some people like hate defenses in the game or think there's too many defenses in the game. I think they make good arguments on that. But Rhett, while only having 2 defensives, of course, there's bubble as well. But sometimes you have to use bubble strategically. While Rhett only has like the 2 defensives, and some classes have like 3 or 4 randomly. They are lower cooldown. They are middling as far as their power. But it's nice to just kind of always have something, even if it's small, in my opinion. Next up, we have some utility expression. So we'll get into skill expression on the con side. But on the pro side, there is some utility expression. So using a Blessing of Freedom at a perfect moment can be really, really good. So Blessing of Freedom can also increase your speed of the person that's on, including yourself. And then you could increase that speed even more with another talent. So, for example, on Queen, it didn't end up mattering, but on our Queen Ansarek CE kill, I noticed that on one pull, one of our players was having a little bit of trouble getting out to drop the portal because they were trying to save their movement for picking up their essence and stuff, which makes a lot of sense, right? And so it was actually on the kill pull, I put Blessing of Freedom on them to kind of speed them out there to get to their portal spot, right? And drop the portal, because they got the portal again, the same person. And I put it on them so they could get out there. Now, they ended up using, I believe, their movement speed on it anyways, but they didn't have to. And that's like a utility expression, right? I just did that, right? You can do the same thing with Blessing of Sacrifice if you want, especially in raid. In Mythic Plus, it's harder to use Blessing of Sacrifice, but you can use a little bit of expression on your utility. Does Rhett have a ton of utility compared to some other specs? No, we're not the most utility spec that there is, but we do have utility, and it allows for like high agency for the player. So what it might lack in some skill expression, you do have like this utility expression is what I'm calling it when I'm framing it in a positive way. The last pro that I have here, and there's more pros, but I wanted to kind of make the list similar, is that they're good in all content. So Rhett's very good if you're a solo player. It's very fun if you're a solo player. It's kind of good if you're a PvP player, and it's very fun if you're a PvP player for the most part. It's very good in Delves. It's very good in Mythic Plus, and it's very good in Raid mostly because it has that on-demand prio damage. So in everything, it's kind of good and it's kind of useful, but it's not the best, right? And we'll get into that on the con side, but it's good in all content. If you're in a Mythic Plus group, as long as you're doing the things right, if you follow my guide or follow a different guide that is similar to mine, because I will be mostly correct in my guide, but if you follow my guide and you're doing the stuff, you're not going to be holding down your Mythic Plus group. You're not going to be holding down your Raid group. You're going to be a welcome addition to any team, any group, and you're also going to be fine on all the solo content as well. So Rhett is good in all content, so it's a safe choice. It's a very okay, this choice is safe. I'm going to be fine, but maybe you don't want to be fine. Maybe you want to be more than fine. So let's get to the cons, which are not huge cons to me, but it could be a con to you, especially if you're not currently a Rhett player. So I have not likely to be meta. What do I mean by that? Meta classes are classes that are specs that you just have to do something. So for Raid, it's extremely unlikely that they are going to be meta. Now, that can change if Holy Paladin is bad and Prop Paladin is bad for Raid, right? You still want your Devotion Aura, and Rhett is good in all content. So could Rhett possibly become meta for Raid for Devotion Aura? It's possible. A lot of people are still probably going to opt for the Holy Paladin for Devotion or for Aura Mastery. And Prop Paladins still have, even if they weren't tuned that great, they still have, spell warding and stuff like this, right? So it's not likely to be meta for Raid, but it could be. And it's not likely to be meta for Mythic Plus either. Rhett is like, for the past few seasons, Rhett is right on the outside of meta for Mythic Plus. Like, they're in that next group. So whatever the meta is, and then there's like a next group that's almost meta, Rhett is in that group for Mythic Plus. So it's not likely that they will shift into the main group, but it is possible if the AoE damage, some of the early AoE damage I've seen for Rhett is actually really, really good. And so if the AoE damage is like one of the best or the best, and then they also have utility, they have on-demand prio damage, solid defensives to survive, then all of a sudden Rhett could sneak into the meta. So I'm just saying it's not likely to be the meta. So if you want to for sure be a meta class, then probably not picking Rhett. But it is close. It's not like it's far off from being meta. Next up for the cons, we have low skill expression. So this is the one that's probably the most damaging con maybe to Ret right now, is that it is low skill expression right now. And what I mean by that is just how I said for utility expression, where you can kind of like choose when to use your utility, and it can be really impactful. Well, your skill is not as impactful, and I'll give a good example of this. So we'll talk about Queen Ansarek again, since that's the boss that I've been fighting for a while before we got the kill. My best pull, my best phase 1 damage pull on Queen Ansarek, I actually completely messed up my cooldowns. So in this patch it's fixed, but in 11.0 in season 1, Hammer of Light has a little bit of lag time, and it's fixed now, so don't worry about that. But that can cause some issues, and in particular, every once in a while, once every 20 pulls, once every 40 pulls or something, I will press it, but the internal lag, it does not go off, right? And so my highest damage pull on phase 1, I actually completely missed one of my Hammer of Lights, one of my most important abilities, into my execution sentence, like one of my major cooldowns, basically. Completely missed it because I pressed it, didn't go through, but then pressed another button, and then just kept doing my rotation. Didn't notice it until it was almost it was too late, basically, because it has a time limit on when you can use it. And so that's what I mean by low skill expression, and that was my highest damage pull for that phase, for phase 1, at least. Now, will that average out over time? Yeah, probably, but I thought that was just a really good example. And like, there'll be pulls where you're pressing every button right, and maybe your damage is lower than normal. It's not even because it's highly RNG. It's just because there's no real way to like make a huge difference. It's not hard to fit all your globals into your execution sentence anymore. When execution sentence was first introduced in Shadowlands, it was actually very hard. You had to time out your divine toll ticks to get the perfect execution sentence, and if you didn't do that, you were missing out on a lot of damage. So that was actually kind of medium to high skill expression. But now you don't have to do that for execution sense, which I'm actually thankful for. That's like not the skill expression that I personally want, that method of it. But like, it doesn't really matter what order you press your generators in that much. Like, you want to make sure you're pressing your judgment a lot, because it, you know, generates a lot of damage and stuff. But it doesn't matter a ton what order you're pressing your generators in. There is still, you know, a priority list of what you should be pressing, but it doesn't matter as much. And therefore, somebody who didn't study as much as you, and you're both playing Ret, that person might just randomly beat you on a fight. And so some people really dislike that a lot. And so that's why this is probably the most damning con for Ret, is it has low skill expression. It has a high floor, which is good for a pro, but it's a low skill expression. Next con, we have movement limited, but not bad. So especially when you're playing Templar, so your movement for Ret is just speed. We talked about the Blessing of Freedom speed in the utility expression, right? So your blessings can increase speed, especially Blessing of Freedom. And your other movement ability is your Divine Steed, which is just speed, right? Increases your movement speed. So when you're on your Divine Steed, especially in Templar where it lasts longer, it's not bad. It's nice to be able to run around at a high speed for a good amount of time. It's not that it's bad. It's that it's so limited, because it's, first of all you have is speed. There's no, like a warrior, for example, I would say has speed plus leap, right? Speed being charge, right? You can charge something that's just moving really fast at it, but then you also have leaps. You can jump over something, you can jump to something, you can jump it, and it's basically like instant, right? Charge is also more instant than steed, but you could leap out of something and charge it back in, right? And you lose very little uptime for that. Whereas with Ret, you kind of have to horse out and horse back in, and you want to time your horse so maybe you can do both while still on it. And so it's very limited. So for certain fights, it doesn't matter that much. In dungeons, it doesn't matter a ton as much, unless of course you need an instant movement to deal with a mechanic, in which case it stinks. But in dungeons, it doesn't come up as much. But in raids, it can be really limiting on certain fights. I haven't done the fights on PTR, so I don't know how bad that's going to be for raid, but it is something to think about. Almost every other spec has, not every spec, but almost every other spec has better movement options than Ret, because Ret only has speed. You know, Rogue has Shadow Step plus speed. Warrior has speed being charge plus leap. Death Knight has speed plus immuning being able to be moved at all, right? Or immuning being able to be knocked back and stuff, right? And so there's multiple ways to do movement or avoid movement for a lot of specs and classes, whereas Ret just has speed, and that's it. Next up, and the last con we're going to talk about, is the tier set is Omega RNG in a season where all the tier sets are RNG. So that's the whole thing. We're in this casino. We can come over here to this is the raid. It's a casino or whatever, basically. And all the tier sets are RNG. We'll talk about Rets really quick. We're not going to get into it fully in this video. But basically, your spells and abilities have a chance to activate Winning Streak, increasing the damage of your Templar's Verdict and Divine Storm by 2% stacking up. And you can also lose your Winning Streak. And when you lose your Winning Streak, you then get a flat 10% damage buff, and so like 5 stacks of that Winning Streak. So you basically get 5 stacks of the Winning Streak, and then you get to cast Verdict or Storm 4 times in a row. This is much better on AoE, but it can be a little bit helpful with Divine Hammer, which is an ability that actually increases skill expression by like a small amount in 11.1. But it's just super duper RNG. It's perfect. It's the perfect gambling tier set, right? Obviously, some people just hate that. Even if every tier set is RNG, this one is super duper RNG, and it's just like, it's actually truly like gambling. And you can keep losing your Winning Streak after one tick of it and getting your 4 set to proc, and that's actually kind of good in a weird way, especially if it like lines up with Divine Hammer. But it's just kind of weird, because then you just have like a 10% flat damage all the time when that happens, which is good. 10% more damage on like one of your main abilities is really, really good. But you know, obviously you can get lucky the other way and build that Winning Streak up and just never lose it, right? You know, the 12% chance to lose it or whatever, you just never lose it, and now you have a huge damage bonus, so you're just constantly doing that. So it is kind of interesting, but it's Omega RNG. So I know a lot of people base their decisions on the tier sets, and I would just say that Rets is super RNG in a tier where they are all RNG for the most part. I don't know of any that aren't RNG for this particular tier. Maybe there are some, but Ret is super RNG. So overall, to kind of close it out here, overall, I would suggest, if you're looking for a class to play, I would say the Ret is a good class to play for 11.1. I think even if you aren't thrilled with the result, like, oh man, it was actually, instead of, you know, we actually dropped a slot or 2 in priority and Mythic Plus, or man, Proc Pally and Holy Pally were really good, so Ret wasn't needed in raid. You know, I could see, you know, those things happening and that being a little bit deflating to people, but I'm also not telling you otherwise, right? I just told you the truth when it came to that stuff. But overall, like, for me, it matters too, just like the content I'm doing in the game, no matter what it is. Like, if I have to do the delves or whatever for whatever reason at the beginning of the season, I do delves anyways, but like, let's say you're forced to do the delves as like a high-end player. You know, it's fun. It's good that you have a solid class to go in there and do that, and actually maybe even have fun doing it, even if it's not the content for you. If you're not a high-end player, there's very, very little downside to playing Ret in 11.1, and you'll probably have a lot of fun with it, honestly, because Ret is very fun right now. It's the fun design of it is just great. Like, I think people have been happy with it pretty much since the rework at the beginning of Dragonflight. So for multiple years, people have been mostly happy with Ret. Of course, there's things that can always be improved, but yeah, overall, I think I would definitely recommend, as long as you can handle the cons, then, and I'm being very open and honest about the cons there, as long as you can handle those, then I think it actually is a very fun and very rewarding spec to play. So that's it for this one. Hopefully this information can help somebody out there in their decisions. I know there's lots of people making decisions, at least about Ret, because I've been asked just many times already about it. So as always, I do ask you to please subscribe to the channel. It helps me out a lot. If you're already a subscriber, I encourage you to check out the Patreon. And other than that, everybody have a good one.